On the morning of May 1st, 1573, the sun rose over Bamberg, and with it rose a sword, not for war, not for hunting, but for justice. Before the town hall, where citizens, craftsmen, and children crowded the streets, knelt a condemned thief, bound, trembling, ready for what only one man could do: kill. This one was Frantz Schmidt, 19 years old, son of an executioner, and now himself an executor of the law. His first assignment, a simple case of theft, was for him an irreversible turning point. With a single stroke, he became not just a perpetrator, but a symbol, a man who spilled blood to preserve order. Yet in that moment, he knew he had not only killed a man, he had lost his own life. For in the cities of the Holy Roman Empire, executioners were not heroes, not servants of God, not officials like any other. They were necessary, but unclean. Their names were struck from church registers, their children excluded from guilds, their wives shunned by neighbors. The Schmidt family had been trapped in this role for generations. His father, Heinrich, once a simple woodcutter, had been forced by the Margrave of Brandenburg-Ansbach to accept the office, a decision one could not refuse. Whoever bore the sword became an outcast, a living curse. And yet, Frantz did not choose to run away. He accepted the inheritance, not out of defiance, not out of hope for power, but because he realized if he did not do it, someone else would, perhaps with less care, more cruelty, less respect for the law. He moved to Hof, where his father instructed him in the art of execution. Here he learned how to tension a rope so that death by hanging came swiftly, how to position the iron on the wheel so that bones broke without the body dying immediately. For the punishment was meant to deter, not merely to kill, how to wield a sword so that the head fell before the condemned could even scream. It was not a craft of violence, but of precision. A botched blow meant not only agony for the prisoner, it disfigured the entire image of justice. The city administration paid for efficiency, not for brutality, and Frantz learned that his greatest weapon was not the sword, but his composure. While the crowd whispered, screamed, or prayed, he stood still. No grimace, no look of satisfaction, no hesitation. His hands were cold, his voice clear when he read the sentence aloud. He began to record every detail: date, location, crime, method, even the condemned's last words. His diary became not a collection of atrocities, but a document of order. In an age when justice was often arbitrary, he became one of the few who applied it consistently. When he carried out his first execution in Bamberg in 1573, he was not merely a young man fulfilling his duty, he was the first step in a career that would make him the most important executioner of his time. In the following years, he traveled throughout Franconia, Bavaria, Swabia, always wherever the city administration needed him. In Nuremberg, Augsburg, Ansbach, Würzburg, he was everywhere called the Good Executioner, not because of his cruelty, but because of his reliability. He knew the differences between punishments. The sword was reserved for nobles and citizens who had confessed their crime, a dignified death that did not completely disgrace the family name. The wheel, however, was for murderers, rapists, and traitors, a long public process of shattering during which the crowd watched silently as if witnessing a divine punishment. Women who killed their newborns died in a sack, an old Germanic ritual that cast them into the river with animals, symbolically cleansing the impurity. And for witchcraft, heresy, and poisoning, the fire. There, people burned slowly, while priests recited prayers, as if the flame purified not only the body, but also the soul. Yet Frantz never acted out of hatred. He was no sadist, he was no fanatic. He was a man who understood his work as a service, as a necessity that no one else wanted to perform, but that no one could ignore. He documented each execution with the precision of an archivist, not because he took pleasure in it, but because he wanted history to know this did not happen arbitrarily. It happened according to law, And he was the one who made this law visible. His vocation was not a blessing, but a burden. His children were not allowed to attend school unless they were hidden. His wife could not go to the market without being insulted. People spat after him as he walked through the alleys. They called him the dead man, yet he did not respond with anger. He responded with silence and with work. While other executioners spent their days with alcohol, violence, or despair, Frantz remained disciplined. He ate simply, slept early, trained daily with the sword, and cared for his tools like a surgeon cares for his scalpels. He learned Latin to better understand the verdicts. He studied medical texts to know how long a person could live after a broken bone. He observed physicians to understand how the body functioned, not only to kill, but to know when it dies. This knowledge would one day save him, but not yet. Now, he was still the executioner, the untouchable, the one they paid but did not speak to, the one they needed but did not see. And yet in every verdict, in every execution, in every calm gaze he cast upon the condemned lay something else: respect. He did not see only a criminal. He saw a human being bearing their guilt. Some wept, some prayed, some remained silent, and he let them die as they deserved. Not faster, not slower, not with torment, not with mercy, only with precision. Because he knew, in an empire based on ritual and form, the perfection of the punishment was the only form of justice that remained, and he was the only one who perfected it. After 4 decades, after 394 executions, after thousands of glances filled with fear, hatred, and contempt, Frantz Schmidt laid down his sword. It was not a moment of triumph, not an escape from the burden, but a quiet, resolute transition. In 1617, at the age of 65, he stepped before the gallows for the last time. The condemned was a thief who had stolen again. The verdict was simple, the method familiar. A single stroke, one last time. Then he turned away, not towards the tavern, not towards solitude, but towards his house, where an old woman waited for him, her arm broken since she had fallen from a horse 3 weeks prior. She had never asked him for help. No one did. But he had seen how she trembled, how she held her arm as if it no longer belonged to her body. And that evening, as the sun set, he took his tools, not the sword, not the rope, but salves, linen, wooden splints and herbs he had collected for years. He set the arm, he bandaged the wound, and he spoke not a word. Yet the next morning she returned and brought a neighbor whose leg had stopped working after a fall from the attic, and then another, and another. The transformation happened quietly. No proclamation, no feast, no public act, only the doors of his apartment, which slowly ceased to remain locked. People did not come because they loved him. They came because they had no other choice. The city's physicians were expensive, often inaccessible, sometimes ignorant. But Frantz, he knew the body. He knew where the bones lay, how the veins ran when a fever threatened before it broke out. He had examined hundreds of corpses, not out of curiosity, but out of duty. Every exhumation, every post-execution examination had taught him something. How long a person survived after a fracture, how bleeding behaved, how infections began. This knowledge, which he had gathered as an executioner, now became a gift. He healed children who had fallen, elderly men whose joints ached, women who fevered after childbirth. He mixed valerian for insomnia, St. John's wort for grief, sage for fever. He wrote out prescriptions, showed how to clean wounds without contaminating them with filth, and he did it without pay. Sometimes he received bread, milk, and egg, sometimes only a nod. But it was enough. For him, it was no longer work, it was atonement. Not through prayers, not through penance, but through action. Every person he healed was a small act of resistance against what he once had been. The city watched, first with distrust, then with silence, then with cautious respect. Who was this man who had spilled the blood of others and now saved lives? Could he be trusted? Was his heart truly pure? The church remained silent. The city administration hesitated, but the people, those who were sick, desperate, poor, kept coming, and with them came something no one had expected anymore: trust. One day, a young doctor entered his house, not to accuse him, but to learn. "How do you know where the break is?" he asked. Frantz did not answer with science, but with touch. "You feel it, not with the hands, with experience." The doctor stayed. He returned. He brought books. And suddenly, Frantz Schmidt was no longer addressed as the executioner, but as Master Frantz. The contempt had not vanished, but it was broken, not by law, not by power, but by deeds. And then came the moment that changed everything. In 1624, 5 years after he had laid down his sword, a letter from Vienna reached the city of Nuremberg. Emperor Ferdinand II, himself a man of strict law and order, had heard the rumors of the former executioner who was now a healer, of the man who had enforced the law for half a century and now healed people. The emperor ordered an investigation. He read Frantz's diary, he heard witness testimonies, and he recognized here was not a criminal deserving punishment. Here was a man who had transcended the boundaries of his office, not to elevate himself, but to transform himself. And so Ferdinand II issued a decree unprecedented in the history of the Holy Roman Empire. Frantz Schmidt, formerly public executioner, is hereby declared honorable. His office, which he performed faithfully and precisely, shall no longer be regarded as a disgrace. His person, his family, and his descendants are henceforth equal in rights with all honorable citizens of the empire. No citizen may insult, exclude, or disadvantage him or his relatives because of his former profession. It was more than a pardon. It was a rehabilitation, a historic rupture. An emperor bestowing the empire's highest title, honor, upon a man whose name had once been synonymous with shame. In a system based on lineage, rank, and purity, an executioner suddenly became a role model. Not because he was just, but because he had become human. His children could now marry without their unions being considered impure. His grandchildren could attend school without being laughed at. His name, once whispered on the streets like a curse, was now mentioned in official documents as an example of loyalty, discipline, and transformation. Frantz Schmidt died in 1634 at the age of 78. He did not lie in a remote grave far from the church as was customary. He was buried in St. Rochus, next to doctors, craftsmen, and mayors. On his gravestone stood no gallows, no sword, no skull. Instead, Frantz Schmidt, hand of vengeance, heart of the healer, honored in death as in life. This was not an epitaph for an executioner. This was a monument to a human being who had grown beyond himself. He had served the law and yet had preserved his humanity. He had spilled blood and yet had saved lives. He had been ostracized and yet had rehabilitated himself. His story is not a fairy tale. It is not a legend. It is a fact, documented in his own words, in the city archives, in the emperor's official decrees. And it poses a question that still shakes us today. Can someone who kills in the name of society ever become whole again? Can justice, when carried out by the hands of an outcast, ever be truly accepted? Frantz Schmidt says yes. Not because society suddenly became good, not because the church forgave him, not because the emperor pardoned him, but because he himself, day after day, year after year, chose not only to serve but to heal. He was no hero. He sought to be none. He was no martyr. He sought no recognition. He was a man who fulfilled his duty, and then, when he could, rediscovered his humanity. In a world that distinguished between good and evil, pure and impure, honor and shame, he did not break these boundaries with violence, but with calm. with precision, with patience. He proved that a person is not defined by their profession, but by what they do afterward. He proved that knowledge emerging from the shadows can cast light. He proved that even the darkest role, if performed with conscience, can find a path to dignity. Today, in an age when we debate rehabilitation, stigmatization, and social exclusion, his story is more relevant than ever. Who are the executioners of our time? The police officers who kill in the line of duty? The prison guards who work daily with despair? The soldiers who carry out orders they do not understand? The doctors who treat dying patients while society ignores them? They all carry an invisible sword, and perhaps, like Frantz, they do not need our adoration. They only need the opportunity to transform. His gravestone is not a monument to the executioner. It is a memorial for us all, that no person is forever what others make them. That justice lies not only in imposing punishments, but in finding paths to survival, reintegration, and honor. Frantz Schmidt did not pray to be forgiven. He acted to deserve it. And the world, reluctantly, slowly, but finally, agreed. That is his lesson. And it endures.